Tonight's unique event is United in Anger, which is a really magnificent and very important film, as you'll see tonight. The presentation tonight is a collaboration between Cinema Politica and the HIV/AIDS lecture series.
ACT UP had this incredible infrastructure. There were lots of lawyers who had been recruited in ACT UP to take care of people, plus there was always a system whereby anyone who planned to get arrested, they had their names, their addresses, contact, and all this information. And then there were people waiting outside the police precincts, so that waiting until everybody got out. But because of the power of the group, generally people were arrested, but they weren't. The expression is put through the system, which meant that they weren't arraigned, they weren't indicted. Generally, that they were given a desk appearance ticket, and generally after 6 months it was wiped off their record, supposedly. On rare occasions, people were arrested. For instance, at the Republican Convention in 1992, Scott Sawyer was charged with attempted murder for allegedly biting a police officer, and he was forcibly tested for HIV in jail. It took 2 years to get him off. I mean, he wasn't in jail for 2 years. No, he was in jail only for a short time. But I mean, he didn't even bite. I mean, it was just completely made up. And then the worst incident was at a protest outside a police precinct in New York, where the police grabbed this guy, Chris. I'm blanking on Chris's last name. But anyway, they dragged him into the police precinct and beat him, and he has permanent neurological damage. So that's the worst bit of police violence that happened. And then there are cases where people actually got arrested intentionally. Needle exchange. I wish needle exchange could have gotten into this film. People in ACT UP forced New York State to change its law about that people. It became legal for people in New York to have needles, and it was an important part of stopping the epidemic among intravenous drug users. They used the necessity defense, which meant they spent 10 weeks convincing a judge that they broke this law with the intention that a much worse law, something much worse was happening, and therefore they were acquitted, and the law changed in the state of New York, and ultimately in most of the United States. Yeah, I have to say when I first saw that poster, I was quite taken aback. And it comes from Toronto, right? Yeah. AIDS Action Now. People have been trying to do prevention for now close to 30 years. And in the 80s and early 90s, because we were so close to the devastation of the disease, I think the fear factor really worked, and it did cut down on unsafe sex. But now with the cocktail, things are a lot more complicated. And I'm not a prevention expert. In a way, it's really hard for me to talk about the contemporary situation because in a real sense, I live in 1987. That just with the oral history project, with making this film, I'm constantly reliving what happened in the late 80s and early 90s. So it's really hard for me to know what's going on now. But I think there need to be lots of ways of dealing with prevention. And so I guess I'm basically for trying all of them. That one took me a lot of time to understand, but it is possible to bear back and be responsible. That there are circumstances where it is. I mean, where if you're on the cocktail and you're undetectable, the possibility of transmitting the virus is really low. And I think we have to take that into consideration. In fact, I understand that if we could get half the 30 million people in the world on the drugs and undetectable, that the transmission rate would start going down and we could get rid of AIDS within a generation. But, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it is. But there's no political will to do that. Well, at the time, when it first passed, I felt betrayed because they took the public option out of it. Because I felt like it really wasn't that much to ask for allowing everybody to opt into Medicare, which is our system for people over 65, which I am very much looking forward to participating in 3.5 years. Although I get health insurance because my boyfriend works for a company that gives healthcare insurance to domestic partners, although he has to pay $2,000 a year and then pay taxes on the $5,000 a year of imputed income that his company pays towards my health insurance. So, and people who are married don't have to pay that. But even though we now have gay marriage in New York, it doesn't work for those things. I wish there were a simple answer to that. There are two things. First, the power of ACT UP diminished. It took over a period of years, and it was the cause of that. There was a number of causes of that. One is that so many people died, and it was incredibly debilitating. And the other major aspect to that was the change from the Reagan and Bush administrations to the Clinton years. And Clinton's famous line about "I feel your pain," that was actually said to Bob Rafsky, the guy who appears a couple times in the film, including near the end, where he gives that impassioned speech about Mark's soul being able to rest in peace. And so what it did, it became this squishy target, and it was really hard to work against that. And then, but even more than that was that the issues became much more complicated, and people never really figured out how to organize around those larger philosophical issues. That, in a way, it was easier to demonstrate for particular drugs, or for the FDA to do a certain thing, for the NIH to do things. But those larger issues of universal health care, and even like universal human rights, that takes long years of work. And to answer the subtitling first, we have it in Spanish, German, Portuguese, and Arabic so far. And the Arabic exists because we did a tour of Israel and Palestine, and actually the first place we showed it outside the United States was in Ramallah. One woman said she was so inspired by seeing a group that spent years using every tactic they could think of to, to achieve their goals, and she saw that like the Palestinian struggle. And then the straight guy in the audience said it was the first time he'd ever seen a film where gay people were shown positively. But also it was translated by a woman in Gaza, and apparently she used the word normal to translate straight. So everybody was a little annoyed by that. But we just had it retranslated by this great guy who lives in Stockholm. He's a Palestinian who lives in Stockholm. So. To go directly to your question about how the film should be used. I mean, one thing is screenings like this in colleges and universities. I've done a bunch of them, and I want to do a lot more. Cinema Politica is distributing it in Canadian colleges and universities wherever they show, but also we're doing it in grassroots organization. AIDS Action Now in Toronto has shown it in a bunch of like little screenings for grassroots people. There are a couple of screenings in suburbs of Vancouver for youth groups and HIV groups. So there are all sorts of things like that, as well as showing it in film festivals and any cinema that wants to show it.
And I really want to thank Jim Hubbard for coming here for the